A struggling farmer named Mason Reed is hired to bury a lifeless woman in the woods, but when she opens her eyes, his world changes forever. Mason Reed, a rugged 36-year-old farmer with sun-worn skin, dusty jeans, and sad blue eyes, stood in the clearing at dawn, shovel in hand. His worn boots sank into the soft spring soil as he stared down at the loosely wrapped figure in the tarp. He didn't ask questions. The man who paid him just needed a grave. Money was tight. Caleb, his 10-year-old nephew with curly blonde hair and a gentle stutter, needed food and school books. Mason hated this job, but he couldn't afford pride. As he knelt beside the body, a whisper pierced the morning mist, faint, almost unreal. "Help!" He froze. Dropping the shovel, he ripped the tarp open. A young woman, maybe late 20s, with pale skin smeared in dirt and a bleeding temple, lay motionless except for her fluttering lashes. Her lips moved again. "Please?" His heart pounded. She was alive. He scooped her up in his arms. She was light, too light, her frame frail and cold to the touch. Her face, delicate but bruised, was contorted in pain. Mud clung to her torn white dress. Her long chestnut hair was dangled with leaves. "I got you," he whispered. He loaded her into his rusty pickup, speeding down the bumpy dirt road to his farm. His cabin was old and weather-beaten, but it had warmth, blankets, and clean water. Caleb watched wide-eyed from the porch, clutching his toy truck. "Is she dead?" the boy asked. "No, son, she's not." That night Mason sat beside her, dabbing her forehead with cool water, whispering reassurance. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring nonsense. But when she finally whispered, "Don't let him find me," Mason knew this was more than a rescue. It was the start of something he didn't yet understand. Morning light filled the cabin. The woman stirred, groaning softly. Her eyes fluttered open, hazel and filled with confusion. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Mason said. Seated beside her in a flannel shirt, his rough hands still stained with soil. "I found you in the woods. You were almost gone." She blinked slowly. "I don't remember." Her voice was weak, strained. He offered her broth. "Do you know your name?" She hesitated. "Blair?" He frowned. It didn't feel right, even to her. Over the next days she began healing, wrapped in Mason's oversized shirts, resting in the warmth of the fire. Caleb would bring her tea or read to her quietly. She smiled more each day, but behind her calmness was a growing fear. Something was missing, something dangerous. At night she dreamed of a man's voice yelling, a car crash, cold water screaming. She woke up gasping. Mason, shirt unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled up, face weary, rushed in. "You're safe, Blair." "I don't think that's my name," she whispered. "And I don't think I was supposed to survive." Mason's gut tightened. Whoever had left her for dead had wanted her that way. He gave her an old journal and pen. "Write what you remember, even small things." She began scribbling disconnected words. Estate, Montgomery, Red Ring, Allen, fire. None of it made sense to her yet, but Mason was piecing things together. He'd never turn her in, not until he knew who tried to bury her and why. Mason's instincts screamed louder with each passing day. He wasn't just dealing with a traumatized woman. He was protecting someone who had been hunted. While tending to his fields during the day and Ella still calling herself Blair at night, Mason began asking quiet questions in town, subtle, indirect. But then came a break. While cleaning out the lining of her ruined coat for washing, Mason found a tiny, soaked monogram tag inside the inner pocket. He waited until she was stronger. "Blair, do you think your name might be Ella?" She looked at him with wide eyes. Something inside her face shifted. "Ella, Montgomery." She dropped the spoon she was holding. Someone tried to kill me." The color drained from her face as her body trembled. The dam had broken. That night she told Mason in fragments about a man named Allen, her fiancé, about controlling behavior, about fear, about her parents' sudden deaths in a boating accident, and Allen inheriting access to everything if she were gone. Mason gripped the arms of his chair. The woman in his cabin wasn't just someone's bride. She was the key to a fortune, and someone had tried to make her vanish. Now that she remembered who she was, Ella Montgomery, the sole heiress of the Montgomery shipping fortune, had a choice to make. She could go back, to lawyers, police cameras, and reporters, or she could stay buried, alive in the woods with Mason and his nephew, where no one knew her real name. Mason didn't pressure her. He only made sure she ate, rested, and regained her strength. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she admitted one evening by the fire. "You won't have to find out," Mason said simply. He meant it. Caleb had already taken to her like an aunt, offering her flowers, asking for bedtime stories. Mason caught himself smiling when she laughed, and when she looked up at him, something in his chest tightened. But danger still lingered beyond the trees. Ella decided she wouldn't run forever, but she needed time and trust. She asked Mason for help to reclaim her name safely and on her terms. Mason taught her how to blend in, how to work on the farm, how to shoot a rifle, how to move through town without drawing attention. Ella changed. She became stronger. Gone were the silks and pearls of her former life. She now wore jeans and flannel like Mason, her hands calloused from garden tools, her hair always tied back in a loose braid. Still, the shadows hadn't left her eyes. One evening, while fixing the old porch railing, she looked at him. "You've saved me twice, once from the grave, and now from myself." Mason didn't reply. He just kept hammering, but his cheeks flushed. Ella knew she was falling, and she saw the signs in him too, but what right did she have to start over when she hadn't finished the past? Ella penned a letter, not to the police, not to the media, but to her late parents. She wrote it by candlelight, apologizing for running, for almost giving up, and for letting Alan take control of their legacy. Mason found her in tears afterward. "I wish I could send it somewhere," she said, "so they'd know I'm still here, still fighting." "You already have," Mason said softly. "You're living." The next day, Ella began gathering evidence, bank statements Alan had forged, copies of legal threats, witness names from memory. Mason gave her an old chest to store it all. "When you're ready, this goes with you." But neither of them realized Alan was already looking, and closer than they knew. A stranger came asking questions at the general store. Tall, handsome, city suit. He said he was a private investigator. Mason heard it from the shopkeeper that evening while trading eggs. Looking for a woman named Ella Montgomery. Said she vanished weeks ago. Mason's blood ran cold. He raced back to the farm, eyes scanning every corner. "Ella," he called, "pack a bag." She didn't argue. Together with Caleb, they loaded supplies and drove out to the hunting cabin up the ridge, one Mason hadn't used in years. No phone, no power, but it was safe for now. That night, under the flickering firelight, Ella confessed everything. About how Alan had planned the whole thing. Drugged wine. A faked suicide note. Hired someone to dispose of her. He said no one would miss a spoiled rich girl who got overwhelmed and disappeared. Her voice cracked. Mason, jaw clenched, stood and walked to the window. He was furious and helpless. But then he said he messed with the wrong farmer. Ella half laughed, wiping tears. It was the first real smile she'd had in weeks. "I think I love you, Mason Reed." He turned slowly. "I know I love you, Ella Montgomery." Ella couldn't hide forever. With Mason's support, she returned to Dusty Creek under a new name. Eliza Moore. No one recognized her in jeans, a baseball cap, and dark sunglasses. While Mason sold vegetables at the market, Ella visited the courthouse. She slipped a note to the deputy clerk, someone she remembered as kind. Inside was her real identity, the attempted murder, and a list of names. It wasn't safe to stay long. Alan's reach stretched far, and she felt eyes on her back as she exited. Mason was waiting with the truck, Caleb bouncing in the seat beside him. "We done?" he asked. "For now," she said. But her heart wouldn't stop racing until the past was behind bars. Back at the cabin, Ella and Mason created copies of everything. A thumb drive, a manila folder, a hidden box buried behind the shed. Caleb, ever curious, asked, "Why are we hiding papers?" Ella kneeled beside him. "To protect the truth, sweetheart." The boy nodded solemnly, hugging her. Mason watched the exchange with something deeper than admiration. He saw her strength, her gentleness, her heart. He'd lost everything once, his parents, his brother. Raising Caleb alone on dusty land had made him hard. But Ella brought light, and if protecting her meant going to war, so be it. It was Caleb who saw the black SUV from the woods first. Mason, a car. Mason grabbed his shotgun. Ella ducked behind the doorframe. The man who stepped out wore sunglasses and an expensive jacket. It was Alan. Calm, confident, dangerous. "I'm looking for my fiancée," he called. "I know she's here." Mason stepped forward. "This is private property." Alan smiled coldly. So was her life until someone stole it. Ella wanted to scream, to cry, but instead she stepped out. "I'm not yours, Alan, and I never will be again." The look on his face turned from smug to seething. "You'll regret this," he growled. "Not as much as you will," Mason replied. The next days were tense. A drone buzzed over the farm. Strange calls came to Mason's phone. One night the power was cut, but Ella refused to run. Instead they met with a retired sheriff, someone Mason trusted. They handed over the evidence, everything. "This'll take down half his network," the old man said, eyes wide. Ella's hands trembled. "Will it be enough?" "It's already more than I ever expected." Now they had protection, legal backup. But Ella still wore her nerves like a second skin. Mason never left her side, not once. And Caleb began sleeping in their bed at night, curled up between them, as if he sensed that together was safer than alone. The knock on the cabin door came at dawn. Federal agents. Mason's muscles tensed until he saw the smiles. "We got him," one of them said. "Caught trying to board a jet. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. Your girl's safe now." Ella collapsed into Mason's arms. The man who tried to bury her had finally lost his freedom, but justice came with a cost. Now the world would know who she was again. Reporters, cameras, flashing lights. Ella turned to Mason. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "Not to the penthouse, not to the headlines." Mason gently cupped her face. "Then stay here with us." She didn't hesitate. "I choose this life with you, with Caleb, with hope." Weeks passed. The cabin became brighter, full of laughter, morning pancakes, Caleb's schoolwork on the table, and Ella's garden blooming in the yard. She wore her hair loose now, smiled often. Mason finally fixed the front steps and built a bench. Ella began volunteering at the town clinic, quietly, under the name Eliza. No one questioned it. One day she whispered to Mason, "I don't miss who I used to be. I miss who I could have been before all that." Mason kissed her forehead. "You're becoming her now," and in that truth Ella finally exhaled. Caleb asked if he could start calling her Aunt Ella. She burst into tears. "Only if I can call you my little sunshine." They laughed together as Mason looked on with love-filled eyes. He wasn't a rich man. He had no legacy but the soil beneath his boots and the kindness in his calloused hands. But in Ella and Caleb he found more than wealth. He found purpose. Ella surprised him one evening. "I want to put my inheritance to use, quietly, to build something that matters here. A local shelter, a school fund, farm equipment for neighbors." She would be known not for who she was born as, but for who she chose to become. It was Caleb who pushed for it. "You two already act married," he said at breakfast. "Why not make it real?" Mason turned bright red. Ella laughed until she cried. Later that night by the fire, Mason pulled a ring from a carved wooden box. It wasn't flashy, it was his mother's. "I don't have much, Ella, but I have love, and I have you, if you'll let me." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I buried my old life, Mason, and from that dirt you helped me grow something new." They wed beneath the old oak tree beside the cabin. Ella wore a simple ivory dress. Caleb held the rings. The town showed up, neighbors who never asked questions, only offered casseroles and smiles. As they exchanged vows, the wind picked up like a whisper from her past, saying goodbye. And when Mason kissed her, the whole forest seemed to breathe. Two broken lives had found each other in the dust. Now they stood whole. Years later, the Reed Montgomery farm became a beacon. Not for crops or cattle, but for healing. Women in need. Children with nowhere to go, people lost in the storm of life. Ella had once been buried, but she rose, she chose life. Mason stood beside her, as always, strong and steady. And Caleb, now taller, helped run the place with a heart full of gratitude. What began with a shallow grave became a legacy. Not of wealth, but of survival, kindness, and love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, resilience, and second chances. Every life has a chapter worth telling, you just have to dig deep enough to find it.